behalf of my colleagues from the University of Economics in Prague and our Department of Psychology, I would like to present you the results and the topic of relational mindfulness. I expect that you know a little bit about mindfulness. I will just briefly say that it is a kind of state that is related to the enhanced attentiveness and awareness of the present moment, which tends to be non-judgmental and tends to be focused on the moment by moment of the present experience. So basically what it is about becoming aware of what's going on right now, becoming aware of what's happening around me, that is in you as the audience. Somebody may be perhaps bored, somebody may be interested, somebody may be skeptical, so if I practice mindfulness, I'm aware of that right now. And it is also about becoming aware of what's going on inside myself. That is what feelings I have, am I nervous, am I relaxed, what thoughts I have in my mind and how my body feels, does it tremble, is it relaxed, etc. So this is well-known picture. What is the difference between the one who is mindful, that is the person who can perceive the present moment, and the one who is not mindful, that is the person who is lost, we can say, lost in his thoughts and expectations, imaginations, etc. There was a nice presentation today about decentering, which is used in psychotherapy. Basically, decentering is related to mindfulness. It is about becoming aware and becoming detached from the present thoughts. So even in this state, one can be mindful, but it is the matter of awareness. Yes, if I'm not aware of that, I'm not mindful, I'm lost in my thoughts, and I cannot perceive reality, I cannot adapt, I'm becoming stressed, etc. So you can see really briefly how the field is growing. It's growing a lot. It is in the clinical environment today, the institutional environment, psychotherapists, as well as managers, teachers, nurses. All of them in some institutions practice the mindfulness, and it has some nice results. However, our field is some, we can say, special part of the mindfulness field. It's called relational mindfulness. And relational mindfulness is also the thing which I explained a few moments before, but it is always developed within the social interaction. Yes, it is developed when I'm with you in the social environment or when I'm conversating with somebody. So that is the specifics of the relational mindfulness. So that's why these authors say that it is in vivo technique within the living. Yes, so I'm not meditating in my nice cottage in a nice environment. I'm just in the social environment. So that's why some authors suggest it can be more practical, even more practical than individual mindfulness, although I think that it's more likely compatible. There are two, I would say, significant reviews which point to the importance between mindfulness and relationships. The first one was issued last year in the Journal of Management, and they say personal relationships are the fruitful areas of mindfulness research, although they have not been examined so far, as well as, for example, stress, which is really like, you can say, the top topic around mindfulness. Another even newer review, which I highly recommend, is from well-known scholar David Creswell, and they say it is surprising how many authors suggest that the relationship between mindfulness and relations should be examined, but there are so few studies that examine it. We had a nice presentation about loving-kindness meditation before. Loving-kindness meditation is a really close topic to the mindfulness, and it focuses much more on relational outcomes. So it is promising also for the field of mindfulness that this progress is happening. But still, there is a lot of work to do, and even more work to do is in the case of development of mindfulness within the social interaction, which is also another thing. Many authors talk about, yes, relationships are important outcomes. Less of them are talking about how we can develop mindfulness within the social interaction. So there are few studies in the state of art. The first one was published in JAMA in 2009 by Michael Krasner. And in this study there was like 8-week clinical program for the physicians. And this program showed several nice benefits on burnout, caring attitude, emotional management skills, etc. However, the practice of relational mindfulness was really low. There was low space for the practice of relational mindfulness in the whole intervention. There is also quite well-known program called Cultivating Awareness and Resilience in Education, which also showed nice effects on burnout, self-efficacy, and well-being. However, again, relational mindfulness forms a little small part of the whole intervention, which is more focused on the individual mindfulness practice. Also, there are two nice studies, which are the first one, to my knowledge, which focus on examination of the differences between individual, they call it intra-personal mindfulness, and relational interpersonal mindfulness. They show basically that interpersonal mindfulness, which is, according to their description, it is something like umbrella term for the relational mindfulness, has a higher impact on relational outcomes. However, those studies were only the brief studies. That is, the participants experienced something about 50 or 20 minutes long practice, which is actually not so much to actually bring some significant change to one's life. But it is nice that they manipulated the different effect between relational and individual mindfulness. So we can see that current state of art basically lacks the evidence in the case of multiple week interventions. If you are in the field of relational mindfulness, if you are familiar with the mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, they usually have a form of 8-week longer intervention. So then it can bring some changes to the life of participants. So me and my colleagues, we decided to support this emerging field, and we created the intervention called Relational Mindfulness Training. Relational Mindfulness Training basically seeks to help participants to develop 3 levels of relational mindfulness. The first one is mindfulness of self in relationships. Once again, it is right now, I'm here with you, I'm talking to you, but I can be also aware of what's happening inside of me. Yes, my emotions, level of stress, etc. That is the first level. Second level is the awareness of the others in the relationship. That is, right now, I'm observing you, and I'm trying to feel how you feel here. I'm trying to observe your attention, your mood, etc. And the third level is mindfulness of relationship in the relationship. That is, I would say, the most interesting thing. It is about becoming aware of the quality and dynamics of the relationship. So when I'm here with you, what kind of relationships we have, what kind of, we can say, a merged being, a merged entity we are creating, you know, because it's never the same. It's always a different. When you're with different people, it is, we can say, different quality, different dynamics. So this is briefly about what the relational mindfulness is. Here is the illustrating picture, and the development of relational mindfulness in our training, called Relational Mindfulness Training, or I will call it RMT. So is the changing, regular change between active phases, that is the active phase when we're talking about when we're making eye contact, and between the passive phases, when we just close our eyes and we observe what's going on. Yeah? So I observe what's going on in me, what's going on in you, etc. etc. And we change these phases regularly, thanks to this ball. Oh, thank you. Time to hurry up. In order to help participants to stop and really be aware and not be just like auto robots within the interaction. You know? So you can see how it's happening. You know, people make eye contact, people share their thoughts, people also form the groups. And there are some participants in our studies. So the program contains some individual practices, relational practices, and group discussions, all mixed together. But the relational practices have the major part in the whole program. Let's say 75% of all the practices are just relational. So our study is focused on several outcomes. Most of them is individual mindfulness, self-compassion, compassion, empathic accuracy measured by reading mind in the eyes test. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. Authentic leadership, subjective happiness, perceived stress. So those were the outcomes in 2 quantitative studies we made. And basically the compassion is one of the really interesting parts because it is suggested that it is under-examined in the field of mindfulness, so that's why we chose it. We've chosen it also because we wanted to measure whether participation in the program has some influence on the development of caring capacities and interest for others' well-being of the participants. So the first study contained 66 participants, and it focused on short effects, that is just 1 week prior to the intervention and 1 week after the intervention, as most of the studies. You can see here there was assignment to the RMT group and the passive control group, and 2 months later there was measurement again. The final sample had 66 participants, 33 in each groups. And what can we see here? I will just tell shortly because the second study is more interesting. We can see highly significant effects on self-compassion mindfulness and significant effects on authentic leadership. We measured the outcomes by the repeated measures, ANOVA, and the paired sample t-test, as usually in this field. The second study is more important. There is higher sample we can see. There is also long-term effects. So we also measured follow-up period, like there was a question in the previous presentation. And there are also 2 facilitators in order, because the first study was facilitated by me, so we wanted to somehow bring the more robust findings. And we also focused on the effects of individual practice in follow-up period. So you can see the graduates of the program here. And there was again assignment to the RMT group and passive control group. And there were short-term effects with 120 participants for the final sample, and there were 110 participants in the follow-up period. As you know, 6 months later, people are not so willing to fill the forms. So we tried our best. And again, there are nice effects on mindfulness, self-compassion, and also highly significant decrease of perceived stress. And as you can see here, also high size effects. And there was also significant effect on growing of compassion and subjective happiness. The second part of the study, which focused on the long-term effects, also showed highly significant effects in the individual focused outcomes, such as mindfulness, self-compassion, and perceived stress. But the result was not significant for the compassion. You can see it here more specifically that the mindfulness also grew in the case of the intervention group, also grew in the follow-up period. Self-compassion slightly lowered. Compassion almost came back to the original baseline level. Perceived stress fell down, but then growth a bit. And happiness also increased but then decreased. So those are basically the results. Our other findings suggested, finish now, that we also made analysis of the individual practice in follow-up period. So we asked the participants, did you practice regularly after the end of intervention in your free time? Those who said yes, we compared them with the control group, and we also compared high practice and low practice group. Low practice group were the intervention group participants that did not practice, and results were pretty nice. Although not significant, there was notable difference. So the participants that practiced, their results grew also in the follow-up period, but not in the case of the compassion, which somehow supports the assumption that compassion is not developed by individual practice in the case of this program, but it is developed by the relational practice, which did not have any kind of follow-up assessment, follow-up training after the end of intervention. So basically one of the conclusions is that this program might help people to develop pro-social qualities such as compassion, but necessary thing is to bring some follow-up groups. It might be slightly reduced in the case of the organization because they are teams and people who bring together regularly. So the patterns which could be established by the program could be maintained. However, in the case of the management students, which was our sample, it would require some kind of follow-up workshops, which we are actually working on now. And also there was no significant effect between any of the facilitators. Okay, there is not so much time for future directions. I would say only one last thing. What is necessary is to examine the 8 week, that is longer term interventions, and compare them with the active control groups. The best thing would be to use the individual mindfulness interventions such as MBSR. So doing the study which would focus on relational and individual interventions could bring immense contribution to the field, as well as the qualitative studies. Thank you for your time.